Hello everyone. The Filmmakers Legal Clinic at Cardozo provides free legal services to filmmakers seeking to move the social justice needle. The clinic also provides trainings and educational programming to its partners. Today's presentation is part 1 of our training on financing in the film industry. Financing is super important for filmmakers who want to cover the costs associated with the creation of their films. Financing may appear to be rather simple. You typically have 2 parties. 1, the filmmaker, and 2, the contributor or investor. But financing is actually a lot more complex than this simple breakdown, which provides only a starting point for us here. The goals of this training then are threefold. 1, to leave you with a clear understanding of a complex topic. 2, to get you thinking about the types of funding you might pursue for your film. And 3, detail the considerations of both parties to a negotiated transaction. Next is an overview of what we will discuss today. First, we will ask and then answer, what exactly is financing in the film industry? Second, we will study how funds received from investors can be allocated across the stages of a film's creation and distribution. Third, we will define some key terms that appear in discussions concerning financing. Fourth, we will cover the various sources of funding in the film industry. This presentation provides an overview of these sources, and we highly encourage our audience to check out our modules that delve deeper. Each module focuses on one source of funding. After this 4th part on our agenda, we will go over best practices for tracking your funds and investors' expectations. This presentation then recommends strategies for drawing in contributors. We will then wrap up and provide ways for you to stay in touch with our clinic. First, the term financing can be thrown around a lot, but what exactly does it mean and look like in the film industry? In the film industry, we can define financing as the process of obtaining funds which a filmmaker uses to pay for the costs associated with developing, producing, and distributing their project. With this definition in mind, let's consider how you can use your funds for your own film. At the development stage, funds can be allocated for various expenses. Examples of expenses include writing your screenplay and building your creative team. At the pre-production stage, funds can be allocated for expenses including casting, securing permits, and designing sets. At the production stage, funds can go toward the following expenses: equipment rental and wages for various parties, including actors, writers, and other members of your crew. Funds can also cover transportation, location fees, and potential delays or reshoots. At the post-production stage, funds can cover editing, sound design, and music composition. At the distribution stage, funds are split between 1. Marketing and advertising, which includes expenses for trailers, posters, and press releases. 2. Shipping. 3. Packaging. And 4. Shipping physical prints to theaters. Now, before we discuss how your films can be financed, let's first review some key concepts together. These terms tend to appear when filmmakers are trying to finance their films. Here are some key terms that we will examine over the next few minutes. They include management control, creative control, return on your investment, recoupment, and share of profits. Our goal in covering these terms is to ensure that you, as a filmmaker, are on the same page as a potential investor who might have extensive knowledge of these terms. First, let's address the types of control that a contributor may seek in negotiations with filmmakers. The 2 relevant types of control include management control and creative control. Please note that they are not the same. Management control relates to the logistics regarding one's film. This can include the timing and scheduling of pre-production, production, and post-production. It can also include the hiring and payment of crew members. Management control additionally extends to the finances of one's production company and the budget for the film. One who has such control typically has a say over the production and distribution processes and decision-making for the production company. Management control, then, is essentially about how a film and its production company are governed. Creative control, on the other hand, is all about the artistic decisions and vision that one has for one's film. So, one who has creative control will decide what characters and stories to include in a film and what the overall themes of the film are. The creative aspects and projects are often deemed creative works, many of which can be protectable under copyright law and trademark law. These creative works can amount to what we call intellectual property. Filmmakers often seek to keep all creative control over their films. Such retention ensures that no others have an ownership claim over the creative works of the filmmaker. This includes even producers or crew members who worked on the film. Filmmakers can draft clauses or even agreements which expressly say that any works made by an individual for the film are works made for hire, and thus belong to the filmmaker. In other words, even though a crew member or producer may have created something themselves, the work made for hire framework under copyright law transfers this control to the filmmaker here. The ultimate concern is that if others have creative control over your film, your ability to include creative works in your film is limited, and you might need to get permission or a license from others. Throughout this training, we will address how some contributors are looking to gain money after investing in a project such as a film. There are various ways for an investment to turn a profit, but here we are just covering a few of those ways. These tend to appear most frequently. Please do not treat our coverage here as exhaustive, and please understand that we are providing an overview. With this background in mind, let's first consider return on your investment, or ROI. This serves as a tool for assessing how profitable an investment will be. ROI compares the initial investment to the results following the investment. This result is either a net profit or net loss. We calculate ROI by dividing the net profit by the cost of the investment. Once we have that amount, we multiply it by 100 to obtain a percentage. So, an example would be, we have a net profit of $100, but an investment cost of $100. We divide the net profit by the cost. So here we divide 100 by 100 and get 1. To obtain a percentage, we multiply 1 by 100 and get a 100% return on the investment. Moving on to recoupment now, recoupment signifies an investor gaining their initial investment back. So, if an investor invested $500 in a film, and a filmmaker and the investor agreed that the investor would be recouped, the investor would recover this $500 amount. Sometimes the parties will agree that the investor can gain more. In other words, the investor could also gain a share of the profits that the film receives following distribution. Receipt of some share of the profits can occur with or without recoupment. Regardless, a filmmaker and investor will typically negotiate a percentage amount of the profits that will go to the particular investor. For example, the parties might negotiate that the investor will receive 10% of the profits. If a film made $100,000 in net profits, the investor would get $10,000. Complications may arise when it comes to scheduling these payments and prioritizing who gets paid first. We will get to these potential issues later. For now, let's focus on these concepts and how they are tied to the following funding sources. At this point, we understand what financing is and how it can cover all stages of a film's creation. We have also defined some key terms. However, we are still left with some questions, such as who can finance your films and how can your films be financed? This next part of the training is dedicated to answering these questions. But before we answer these questions, let's first consider a hypothetical scenario. Suppose we have a film that discusses Latino culture and history in El Barrio, a neighborhood in Upper Manhattan. The filmmaker and director Emma seeks to focus on the history of El Museo del Barrio, which displays Latin American art. Emma is particularly interested in tracking the transformation of El Museo over the years. It initially served as a community-based institution that was a source of pride and culture for the Latino community, but residents have come to view it as another mainstream cultural institution that has not preserved its Latino character. These changes have occurred while debates concerning the use of public space in El Barrio have ensued, and residents have protested proposed policies which would hurt El Barrio. Emma has her own production company, which is an LLC, and she is the only member of her LLC. Emma's film is now in the development stage. She has written a script, has support from residents who want to be featured in the documentary, and is in the process of building her creative team. The first issue she wants to address is financing her film. She has some ideas, but would appreciate legal advice on where to look, how to speak to investors, and how to best position herself to secure funds. In this section, our objective is to talk about the financing options at Emma's disposal and use her hypothetical film as an example of matters you should be considering when approaching financing. Here, you will see a spiderweb that details the major financing sources in the film industry. They include private investors, crowdfunding, production companies and studios, private equity and venture capital firms, debt financing, government programs, and brand sponsorships. The following slides address these sources, starting with private investors. When you hear private investors, you might wonder who exactly is a private investor. Well, private investors include a range of individuals, which may be a family member of yours, a close friend, a fellow business partner, an angel investor, or entities such as financial firms and nonprofit organizations. Each of these individuals will likely have distinct reasons for contributing to your film. Some investors may want to dedicate some of their money to support filmmakers. These individuals may have a history of investing in other films or may be seriously interested and involved in the film industry. Others may be super passionate about your project and the message you are spreading through your film. And then there are individuals who are very much motivated by profits. These individuals spread their money across various projects, companies, and services to build a diverse portfolio. These individuals will likely seek some return on their investments or recoupment. In other words, they will want to not only be paid back their initial investment, but also earn a little extra and see a high return on their investment. Let's apply these concepts to Emma's case. Emma could approach several individuals. She could go to family, friends, colleagues, and angel investors. Emma might even have business partners from previous ventures she's been involved in and might receive interest from nonprofit organizations and corporate entities. Regardless of who is interested, Emma must prioritize determining the potential investor's motivation. Is the investor interested in donating or contributing money with the goal of earning a profit? This is not always easy to determine, but Emma should try to speak with the investor and understand what makes them interested about her project. This information is important because it will need to be addressed in an investor agreement. These contracts typically have language regarding contributions and recoupment. Emma should ensure that she is on the same page with the investor when it's time to draft the agreement. And of course, prior to drafting the agreement, Emma should consult with the lawyer. Besides private investors, you may launch and seek contributions via a crowdfunding campaign. Crowdfunding refers to fundraising initiatives over the internet that encourage individuals to support or donate to the fundraiser. One may create a fundraiser for various purposes. In the context of film, filmmakers often launch crowdfunding campaigns to raise funds that can cover extra expenditures that were not foreseen or costs known in advance but are not currently covered by other funding sources. When we talk about crowdfunding, I really want you to view crowdfunding as an umbrella-like term. Not all crowdfunding campaigns look the same. That is because there are various types of crowdfunding. Your campaign may be equity-based, donation-based, reward-based, or debt-based. What sets each of these categories apart is the classification of the contributor. One who supports a campaign may seek an ownership stake or equity in your film, and if you are raising funds in exchange for equity, your campaign is equity-based. Here, the governing law is an exemption under federal securities laws known as regulation crowdfunding. This exemption is covered in greater detail in our module on crowdfunding. But if you are collecting contributions from individuals who do not seek anything in return and are giving out of the goodness of their heart, your campaign is donation-based. Here, there are no governing laws. Filmmakers should still pay attention to the terms of service. Now, if you are raising funds in exchange for rewards or tangible benefits, such as a meet and greet with the film's crew, then your campaign is reward-based. Consumer protection laws, such as the Federal Trade Commission Act, govern. On the other hand, if you are seeking loans, which ultimately are returned to the investor with interest, your campaign is debt-based. This is also regarded as peer-to-peer lending and is governed by federal and state lending laws. Crowdfunding campaigns may occur on various platforms. Here we include some popular platforms such as Kickstarter, Seed and Spark, GoFundMe, Start Engine, and Indiegogo. Whichever platform you choose, it is imperative that you review the platform's requirements and terms of service. Not all platforms are structured similarly, and some permit select projects that meet specific criteria. It is also important that you spend the time drafting a compelling story about your project so that you appeal to contributors and have a successful campaign. Lastly, you should be on the lookout for platform fees and potential biases. The success rates of a platform can certainly be helpful, but we encourage you to recognize the potential biases behind these success rates. Going back to our example of Emma, crowdfunding might be best if Emma would like support from the public and believes that she would be able to appeal to a wide audience online. Crowdfunding might also be great for Emma if she is having trouble finding private investors and is looking to obtain donations without promising anything in return. Another reason that filmmakers like Emma might pursue crowdfunding is that a lawyer is not necessary to launch this process. Emma should begin to research various crowdfunding platforms, such as the ones we previously discussed, and study their terms of service and previously successful campaigns. Simultaneously, Emma should figure out whom her campaign will target. These steps should allow Emma to determine which website suits her project best. Once Emma chooses a platform, she should decide what type of crowdfunding campaign she will run. This decision will be based on what, if anything, she is willing to exchange in return for contributions. After, Emma can begin to develop her synopsis, draft a compelling story about her film, and establish a fundraising goal. Then, Emma may assess relevant laws if she's launching anything other than a donation-based campaign. Emma may consult with a lawyer if she has questions about these laws. Once she has an understanding of these laws, Emma should review her campaign and then prepare to launch. These steps are extensively covered in our crowdfunding module, which we highly encourage our audience to view. In addition to private investors and crowdfunding contributors, production companies and studios may contribute to your film. The two tend to be grouped together, but there is a difference. If you receive funds from a production company, it would manage your film's development and oversee your budget and casting. The production company's role is essentially creative. Studios, on the other hand, provide the infrastructure for your film to develop. Studios are focused on your film's business, distribution, and marketing. A benefit of this source of funding is that production companies and studios tend to have significant funds and are capable of funding your project from creation through distribution. As a result, your marketing and distribution reach expands. Yet, in return, these sources like to have a lot of creative control and say over production and distribution. Also, they will likely want a significant share of your film's profits. When we think about Emma's case, Emma should be asking herself the following before she commits to being funded by a production company or studio. 1. What degree of creative control am I willing to give up? 2. How much of a share of my film's profits am I willing to cede to a production company or studio? And 3. Do I need significant assistance with a particular stage of my film's creation, such as development, production, or distribution? Moving away from production companies and studios, we arrive at private equity and venture capital firms. These types of firms are similar in that they are legal entities that invest in projects. However, there are major distinctions. These differences lie in the projects that the firms fund and the level of risk associated with the firm's investments. Let's first address the projects that receive funds from these firms. Private equity firms tend to invest in private companies that are able to make them money. These firms expect high profits and fund projects they trust will earn them money. Meanwhile, venture capital firms invest in early-stage and emerging companies. These firms choose this form of investment strategy because of the high growth potential and high returns that these companies offer. Venture capital firms then choose a strategy that is higher in risk, considering how there's less of a guarantee that the emerging company will turn a profit, whereas private equity firms follow a strategy that is lower in risk because they can predict the returns they will receive. Despite these differences, the two types of firms will generally have the same objective: high returns and a share in ownership. Similar to what we discussed for production companies, studios, and certain private investors, it is important that you consider whether you are willing to give up any ownership stake in your film and your own production company if you have one. In Emma's case, Emma is only at the development stage, so it might be best for her to hold off on agreeing to anything with a private equity or venture capital firm. After all, Emma unlikely has a solid idea of her film's revenue at the distribution stage. Because these firms care about high returns, Emma must ensure that her earnings at the distribution stage are high. Another matter that Emma should extensively think about is whether she is willing to give up an ownership stake in her LLC. Emma will need to ask herself whether she cares about a firm having management control over her production company. Some filmmakers are willing to give this up in exchange for an investment, whereas others are not. This is ultimately a personal choice. Let's now focus on another source of funding: debt financing. Here, the relevant parties are a filmmaker and a lender. Lenders include banks and individuals, both of which typically have no ownership or control over the film. The way that debt financing works is that the filmmaker will borrow the lender's money and repay it with interest over time. Often, the lender will want to ensure that the filmmaker is able to pay back the lender, so the lender will require security, which is called collateral. This security on the loan reduces the risk for the lender. Examples of collateral include a home if you were to take out a mortgage, or a car if one were to take out a car loan. In the film industry, collateral can come in the form of intellectual property and distribution rights. If the filmmaker defaults and does not pay back the loan, the lender can take and even sell the collateral. The lender can also bring legal action against the borrower for defaulting on the loan. With these consequences in mind, filmmakers like Emma, for example, must understand that they owe a financial commitment to the lender up until the filmmaker has repaid the loan. Although she would not be ceding management or creative control, this source of funding is seen as risky for Emma because she must pay the lender back regardless of her film's level of success and revenue. These risks are worth keeping in mind before committing to debt financing. Switching gears, the government can also fund your film in two major ways: government grants and tax credit incentives. The federal government and state governments dedicate parts of their budgets for advancing the arts and cultures. Eligibility for these programs and fellowships typically depends on the location of your film's production, your film's genre, your film's target audience, and your expenditures. When I say expenditures, I mean in-state costs that reach a certain threshold. Some state grants and tax credit incentive programs require films to have spent a certain amount of money on production and development in their own states to be eligible for their programs. Before you apply to these government-backed programs, it is essential that you study the program's requirements. Often, government departments and agencies that run these programs will monitor your project's development over the course of the program. In addition, you would be required to submit various documents, including scripts and synopses of your film, progress reports, a document detailing your distribution plans, a detailed budget, and expenditure reports. Also, some programs will ask for you to submit distribution materials such as trailers and press releases. These programs may even expect to receive an acknowledgement in your film's credits and may reserve the right to conduct an audit of your production company to understand your financial standing. Please keep in mind that this list is not exhaustive and only provides a broad overview of government grants and tax credit incentives requirements. For more detail, we encourage you to carefully read through the requirements of the grant or program you are interested in. We also encourage you to check out our module on government financing. Let's discuss what Emma should be considering for her own film. There are a few reasons why Emma should pursue a government grant. First, the program may have the same shared mission and values as Emma. Second, the program may be prestigious, and being a fellow within the program could lead to future opportunities for her. And there is no recoupment or requirement to repay like there would be with, say, a private investor. There are also great reasons for Emma to seek out a tax credit incentive. This would allow her to save on in-state expenditures. Tax credit incentives are also generally accessible to all filmmakers because they do not have many restrictions. At the same time, Emma might want to consider the drawbacks of government grants and tax credit incentives. As we previously discussed, grants typically entail strict reporting requirements and thus impose a heavy administrative burden on filmmakers. Emma may be hesitant to report details about her finances or permit auditing, or she may not be, and in that case may want to proceed in her pursuit of a government grant. On the other hand, tax credit incentives can restrict Emma's location shoots because they will require her to spend up to a certain amount in a state. Another disadvantage is that the benefits from the incentive are delayed, so Emma would not receive the benefits immediately. Lastly, the government would conduct a rigorous audit of Emma's production company. Tax credit incentives thus raise similar concerns as government grants. Finally, there are brand sponsorships. Brands typically look to invest in two ways. First, via brand partnerships, and second, via product placement. Brand partnerships signify a brand contributing funds to your film, whereas product placement means that a brand will pay for you to include its products or services in your film. What is especially great about this type of funding source is that there are benefits for both parties. Let's consider our example about Emma. Emma would get to retain creative control over her film while receiving financial support. Brands, meanwhile, would use Emma's film to further promote their products and services. Their image reaches a wider audience, and their products and services gain further exposure. Some films that were sponsored by brands include the Lego Movie, Transformers, and James Bond series. The James Bond series is especially known for its product placement, considering how it includes luxury clothing, style, and accessory brands that have promoted their products and services to James Bond viewers. Before we move on to our penultimate section of today's training, we would like to briefly discuss E&O insurance, or errors and omissions insurance, because this is key to distribution deals and serves as a protection device. After all, filmmakers will find that E&O insurance is a requirement for distribution deals that filmmakers enter into with, say, studios. Now, this does not classify as a funding source like how private investments, debt financing, crowdfunding, and brand sponsorships do. Instead, E&O insurance is primarily a way for filmmakers to protect themselves against future financial losses. Filmmakers can be sued for several matters, including copyright infringement, defamation, a violation of one's privacy and publicity rights, unfair competition, and breach of contract. If lawsuits were to arise, a filmmaker would want to have E&O insurance because lawsuits can get expensive, and this insurance would cover legal fees and judgment costs. When applying for E&O insurance, insurance companies will likely request some information from filmmakers. This information includes fair use opinions, which provide a detailed analysis of a filmmaker's use of copyrighted material without consent or a license, chain of title, which tracks one's ownership or proprietary rights in a film's production, releases, and scripts and synopses. Up to this point in the presentation, we have addressed what financing looks like, how funds are allocated, what are key concepts in this world of financing, and what are the main types of financing in the film industry. But a few questions remain. Some include, how can I, as a filmmaker, keep track of my funds, and what are investors' expectations? To keep track of your funds, it is important that you have both balance sheets and a summary of cash flows. Balance sheets tell you the overall health of your production company and detail your assets. A balance sheet typically provides two snapshots, one at the beginning of the period being reviewed and one at the end. Information is reported under three headings: assets, your economic resources, liabilities, and owner's equity. On the other hand, cash flows show any changes in an entity's cash position during a given period. It lets you know how your entity or production company acquired and used cash during this period. Besides these financial statements, investor agreements and memoranda of understanding, or an MOU, also track how much an investor has given to support your film. These documents are particularly important in transactions between you as a filmmaker and private investors. These agreements are covered in greater detail in our module on private investors. Shifting gears toward investors' expectations, there are certain requests that you may receive from an investor. For instance, an investor may ask you to report on the financial standing of your production company and provide updates on your budget. Tied to these requests is the inspection of your books. Some investors want to make sure that there are no financial impediments that will impact your film and ability to turn a profit. By inspecting your financial records and accounting materials, investors will have a better understanding of your financial health. Separately, an investor may ask for a credit or acknowledgement in your film as consideration for their contribution. This often comes up in a producer-filmmaker context and at times comes up in the investment context. Lastly, many investors will expect to recoup their initial investment. If you have a pool of investors that want to be recouped, it is worth considering the formation of a waterfall recoupment schedule. A waterfall schedule is typically included in agreements such as producer agreements, investor agreements, distribution agreements, and even internal entity agreements such as an operating agreement for an LLC. The waterfall schedule performs a few functions. For example, there is the chronological function in that the schedule details payments to various parties, including producers and investors, and lets them know when they can expect their initial investment to be paid back. Filmmakers can also use the schedule to their advantage by limiting what proceeds get paid out and to whom. Before executing any agreements with investors, you should understand whether investors expect to receive their contribution back. To summarize, not all investors share these expectations. This list provides solely examples of what an investor might request. Before wrapping up, we want to leave you with some tips on how to best attract contributors to your projects and receive funding. First, being passionate about your film's message and developing a compelling story is so important to many investors since they are passionate about films and want to see this passion go both ways. Second, we highly encourage you to develop a pitch package that is captivating. You want to show investors why an investment in your project is worthwhile. Third, establishing a target audience and distribution plans allows you to show investors that you have concrete goals for your film. Investors will be more willing to contribute to and push your film further if you have already addressed these items. Fourth, having materials such as scripts, synopses, and a detailed budget allows investors to learn more about the premise of your film and understand how funds are being allocated. Lastly, past success is always helpful, but by no means is it the defining factor. We include this factor here to stress that if you have worked on any other films or have producers or members of your crew that have contributed to other films, especially ones that have premiered at major festivals, you should highlight these experiences in your pitch packages. While we recommend the items included on this list, we recognize that at the end of the day, there is no single way to go about drawing in contributors. We want you to take home this message. Finally, let's wrap up. Thank you for viewing Part 1 of our Financing in the Film Industry training series. Please check back with us to find our other modules on financing. If you have any questions about financing in the film industry or general questions, please contact us. We are committed to building a community of empowered creatives who can protect their own work and create a more thoughtful, just, and ethical industry. If you are an independent filmmaker looking for additional legal assistance, you can apply to become a client of the Filmmakers Legal Clinic. Also, please feel free to follow us on social media and LinkedIn, where we regularly post updates on all happenings in the clinic and the film industry. This has been a presentation from the Filmmakers Legal Clinic, providing independent filmmakers access to free legal services through the Center for Visual Advocacy at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law.